and Pan-African solidarity, I request that we stand and observe a minute of silence in honor of the departed. Thank you. As you are aware, we commemorate this year's Africa Day under the African Union's 2026 theme, assuring sustainable water availability and safe sanitation systems to achieve the goals of Agenda 2063. Therefore, the 2026 Africa Day renews our commitment to advancing water and sanitation as essential enablers for industrialization, climate resilience, and food security. Additionally, safe drinking water is a critical component of a healthy continent. Africa is endowed with sufficient water resources to meet our basic needs while supporting agriculture, energy generation, and industrialization. The challenge before us, therefore, is not one of scarcity, but of governance, infrastructure, and climate resilience. Notably, Kenya hosted the 11th Ocean Conference in Mombasa, that is just a few days ago, in June 2026, the first to be held in Africa, reflecting Africa's growing leadership in ocean governance and the blue economy. A notable outcome of the conference was the adoption of the Mombasa Declaration, which advances sustainable fisheries, marine conservation, and the fight against illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing that costs African countries an estimated 11 to 13 billion US dollars annually. Our rivers, lakes, aquifers, and maritime spaces naturally connect our nations and peoples. They can contribute to regional integration. Therefore, Africa's shared water resources must be a source of cooperation, solidarity, and peace, not tension and conflict. Your Excellencies, today's commemoration renews our commitment to amplify Africa's collective one voice in multilateral fora, including calls for United Nations reform to advance our shared aspirations for peace, prosperity, and a more inclusive international order. The continent continues to grapple with the twin challenge of governance and violent conflicts. As we mark 63 years of African unity, we must consolidate our governance gains and encourage each other to firmly embrace democratic values, recognizing that accountable leadership and strong institutions are important to sustainable peace and the silencing of the guns in Africa. Together, we must intensify our efforts to prevent and resolve conflicts across Africa, while providing relief to affected communities and mobilizing international support for the dire humanitarian crisis in the Horn of Africa and the Great Lakes region. Peace and security remain the bedrock of sustainable development, human dignity, and prosperity. Indeed, the economic dividends of peace and security far outweigh the material gains that states seek to achieve through other economic pursuits. Ultimately, Africa must be at the center of finding solutions to its own challenges. Accordingly, we must support African-led peace and security initiatives and strengthen our institutions such as the African Union, the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD, and the International Conference on the Great Lakes region. And Undermining regional organizations risks entrenching dependency. Peace and security initiatives require coordinated regional and international mechanisms consistent with the principle of subsidiarity to foster ownership and durable stability. Likewise, we welcome emerging prospects for peace in the Middle East, following the positive developments between the United States and Iran, and support ongoing efforts to resolve the Russia-Ukraine conflict. These crises continue to constrain Africa's peace, security, and economic progress. The peaceful resolution of these conflicts will create the conditions necessary for advancing the continent's development and economic transformation. Excellencies, the Africa Forward Summit held in Nairobi in May 2026 reaffirmed our continent's collective resolve to take greater charge of its future by enhancing African agency through stronger African financial institutions, greater domestic resource mobilization, industrialization, value addition, human capital development, and more assertive African representation in global decision making. On behalf of the government of Kenya, I thank you and your respective governments for the resourceful engagement and participation which greatly contributed to the summit's success. Similarly, during the G7 summit in June 2026, His Excellency President Ruto articulated Africa's priorities and position as crystallized at the African Forward Summit. Africa is diversifying and strengthening mutually beneficial partnerships founded on trade and investment rather than aid, and on manufacturing and value addition rather than extraction. Indeed, Africa is no longer an apologist for its circumstances, nor defined by lamentations. We are a voice to be heard, a valued global partner with immense opportunities for shared prosperity, and not a problem to be solved. The outcomes of the G7 summit included commitments to reform the development cooperation system and shaping mutually beneficial partnerships, address escalating global debt vulnerabilities that threaten economic stability, and constrain fiscal space for essential public service interventions, and reinforce guarantee architecture, notably through the African Trade and Investment Development Insurance, ATD. It also advanced the need for democratization of technology, including artificial intelligence, and underpinned the imperative of ensuring responsible use of these digital platforms. The summit further called for deeper cooperation in health, including cancer research and resource mobilization to tackle emerging Ebola outbreaks. As such, we must strengthen African health systems and institutions, including the Africa Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the Africa CDC. Excellencies, amid rising economic nationalism, Africa must accelerate the full implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area to foster inter-African trade, reduce dependence on external markets, and strengthen economic resilience. Equally important is our sustained campaign to raise public awareness of the benefits and opportunities of Continental Free Trade Area. We must also support and strengthen African-oriented financial institutions such as the ADB and the African Export Bank, Afri-Exim. Your Excellencies, the realization of Agenda 2063 depends on a stronger and more effective African Union. Accordingly, His Excellency President William Ruto, in his capacity as the champion of the African Union institutional reforms, continues to engage stakeholders to enhance inclusivity and building consensus in advancing the Union's reform agenda. The success of the reform agenda rests on the unity, commitment, and leadership of all member states. We therefore urge renewed commitment, particularly on sustainable financing, to build a more effective, self-reliant, and responsive African Union. Finally, permit me to make a brief appeal in support of Kenya's candidatures. Kenya has put forward candidates for positions where we believe our country can make a meaningful contribution. We have nominated distinguished and experienced jurists who we are confident will serve with excellence and integrity. The candidates include Professor Phoebe Okoa for re-election as judge to the International Court of Justice, ICJ, for the period 2027 to 2036, and Lady Justice Njoki Ndung'u for election as judge to the International Criminal Court, ICC, for the period 2027 to 2036. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to introduce this good lady, judge at the Supreme Court, Justice Njoki Ndung'u. Thank you. On behalf of the people and government of Kenya, I wish to respectfully commend Kenya's candidatures for consideration and support from member states. To this end, I extend my deepest appreciation to the African Diplomatic Corps for organizing this important event, and to all of us for the presence, participation, and commitment to the ideals of African unity and solidarity. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that we shall truly be in a celebratory mood when we are victorious against war and conflict on the continent, when we have overcome the triple challenges of poverty, disease, and hunger, when we are victorious against epidemics and pandemics, and when victorious against lack of clean water and waterborne diseases. This is the true north, the true measure of our progress and the promise of the Africa Day. Thank you to all of you, Asanteni, and I also thank the host, Egypt, for having us here. Thank you very much.